Hi, my name is Bethany, and today I would like to give my thoughts on the whole Greta Thunberg situation. Side note, I was saying Greta Thunberg to myself, but then I heard someone else say Greta Thunberg, and considering she has a foreignish name, I'm hoping that it's Thunberg. Because that's how I'm going to be saying it through this video. Greta Thunberg is a 16-year-old with Asperger's who is also a climate change activist. She first heard about the climate change issue when she was 8. Apparently she was in school, they watched a video on it, and she actually credits her Asperger's to her activism and her ability to kind of narrow in on that issue and keep being concerned about it and keep doing something and trying to bring attention to the issue, while her other classmates, you know, they were kind of terrified for the moment watching the video, she says, but then they kind of were able to move on and think about other things, and she was very focused on the climate change issue. She started a climate change strike in her home country of Sweden, won a newspaper contest for writing a piece on climate change, and really only grew in visibility from there. From the making of this video, she's already addressed the US Congress and the United Nations. The thing is, with visibility comes criticism. Many are concerned with her message, and a lot of people are even more concerned with her as the messenger. The autism community in general seems to herald her kind of as a hero, as one of their own, because she has Asperger's and is very harsh in their pushback against anybody who says things against her, and also defends her when people are critical of her due to her differences due to Asperger's. So I looked into a bit of the controversy to do with Greta, and here's what I found. So at the top we have people who simply don't believe any part of her message, and that is people who deny that there is any sort of climate change happening. So I wanted to look into this very briefly, and I'm seeing that 97% of scientific reports agree that there is a climate change happening. Some people disagree on why that's happening, but most people see that there is a high uptick trend in CO2 and the whole issue there since the industrial age. So that's kind of where maybe she's coming from, and a lot of people who don't agree with that kind of basically say that the climate's not really changing, temperature's not really changing, etc. However, the majority of scientific data does say that we are experiencing a climate change, and if we don't do something about it, we might not have a planet. Now, there is issue with how fast this climate change is occurring, if the solutions proposed would actually even help in that situation, etc. Probably the most dismissive and childish reaction to Greta are those who are in opposition to science in general. She's only 16! This is a major argument for some reason, and I think it's probably the stupidest one. And the reason I say that is because you would think that people would look at an argument based on the facts and the ideals and the long-term effects of that argument or that perspective, and not just be like, well, a 16-year-old said it, so it can't be true or it can't be right. That's just kind of a dumb position to take, and is very dismissive of people, and I'm not a fan of that one. She's mentally ill. That's another honestly very annoying argument that people bring up, because so are millions of other people. Honestly, you want to tell me that every single person in a place of power has not experienced anxiety or depression, which are basically the most common mental illnesses today? Then there's the misinformed people who call Asperger's or autism a mental illness, which that's just not correct. These people tend to be generally ignorant and kind of rude about how they go about things, especially in their arguments against Greta. She's a plant! No, not the leafy green kind. There are people who actually believe that she was like put in position as some like grand scheme kind of ordeal to convince the youth of climate change. Now, while I can understand that there definitely is an argument for the movement kind of putting Greta in the place that she's in and kind of propelling her as their face of their movement, these people are more like, they don't believe that Greta believes what she's saying. They think she's just an actress because her father is an actor, her mother is an opera singer, so they think that somehow now Greta is an actress and she's just lying about all these things and putting on an act to persuade the world. The reason I think this is kind of a stupid idea is because Greta has a long history of being concerned with climate change and doing things that are visible about climate change, so it's not like she was just randomly picked out of nowhere nowhere. It's not like she has like inconsistencies in her story that people are trying to say and stuff like that. Also, with her having Asperger's, it's not as likely that she would be willing to act for something she didn't believe in the case that she was an actress. She's not autistic. She doesn't have Asperger's. The story is inconsistent. Okay, so people who don't know a whole lot about Asperger's and autism and such not, here's a little bit of information for you. Asperger's is actually a part of autism now. So when people say Asperger's, it's probably because they were initially diagnosed with Asperger's, but now with changes to diagnostic criteria, people who have Asperger's are considered a part of the autism spectrum, therefore autistic. So people use the different words kind of interchangeably for Greta because technically she has Asperger's and technically she's autistic because they're the same thing. Now, Asperger's is more descriptive than autism is in general, so it seems to be her preference for the most part to use Asperger's, probably because that's what she was diagnosed with and it might more correctly describe her. However, that doesn't mean that they can't get the story straight, like she either has Asperger's or autism. That's not relevant. That's just people not understanding that those are basically on the same thing. And some people might want to be more accurate by saying autism because Asperger's is technically no longer diagnosed. Now, as for her actually being autistic or actually having Asperger's, that's really literally not for you to decide. I saw on Twitter especially, of course, you know, Twitter where all the wonderful things happen. I saw people saying, you know, she doesn't have that. She doesn't have that because it's not like someone I know, or it's not like so-and-so. You don't know her. And it's very annoying when people try to armchair diagnose people. She got made fun of a lot by people for her strange mannerisms, literally characteristic of autism or having Asperger's. So for people to be like, well, she doesn't do this thing in front of a camera and I am now apparently some magical doctor who knows her, so I'm going to undiagnose her. Like, it's just stupid. Just don't do that, guys. Don't be dumb, okay? She has Asperger's, she is on the autism spectrum, and you don't get to decide otherwise just because you feel like it. And that's really annoying because they're literally doing it to try to discredit her, because a lot of people are saying that because she has Asperger's, that that gives her kind of a leg up in focusing on the facts and the science. So they're trying to say, well, like, she doesn't actually have it, so then that kind of argument tries to get discredited, or saying that she doesn't actually have it, so anybody who has sympathy or something toward her because of that won't have that anymore. It's just a really dumb tactic, and she's been attacked for having Asperger's or being autistic. So it's just really dumb, like, how many different ways someone wants to attack her based on that particular aspect. She's being used. Now, this one actually got a lot of people up in arms, so I wanted to see why people would be saying that. Many autistics were saying that she simply could not be manipulated just because of her dedication to the science and to the facts, but I think that's a thing with autistics. We don't understand, we're not really talking about the information being manipulated, but the situations around the information. Like, how did she get into the position that she's in? Why did the movement adopt her as the face of their movement? Why are they having her talk to the UN and talk to the US Congress and talk to all these people? Why are they using her specifically? And that's the thing with autism too, is that when someone gets a hold of something that we're passionate about and promotes it and basically makes it seem like they're doing good for that cause or for that thing, we are very, very susceptible to manipulation. She is 16 years old. She is a person who is statistically more likely to be manipulated. So to say, like, she's autistic, she can't be manipulated because facts, that's not necessarily true. So I get it, because I was too looking at the argument like, oh, well, you know, the logical facts, but that's not the only thing. And sometimes we can get really tunnel vision on that kind of perspective where we're like, well, it's just about the thing. It's not just about the thing. There's a whole, like, political paradigm going on around her that she and us might not quite understand. For the people saying that Greta completely started all of this on her own, that's not correct. The whole concern around climate change has been around for quite a while. She just was presented information about it, so clearly it was a thing before her. Just these current strikes right now are because of her influence. Yes, absolutely. She is doing things and making a difference for sure. But to say like, well, she started this whole movement, so she can't be manipulated, like those... That's not quite accurate, and it's sometimes hard to grasp, even for myself, to understand why or how people can manipulate and twist our views a little bit for what seems to be in line with what we want and what we think is necessary, just to serve themselves. So I think we should be critical and at least wary of the people who have put her in this place, because as much as we want to say like, oh, she did all the work herself, she got all the way there herself, her mom is an opera singer. She used her social media to promote her daughter, and for good reason, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Now, within the being used argument, a lot of people are trying to say that Greta is just a mentally ill, mentally abused child who doesn't know what she's doing, doesn't know what she's talking about. She's just being brainwashed and manipulated. And I don't think that's the case. I do think that Greta is a strong young woman who's very smart. However, I do think that she might be starting to develop the very characteristic autistic tunnel vision, with the kind of belief maybe that the weight of the world is on her shoulders. Literally, if she doesn't get them to listen to her, that the entire world is going to end, and very soon. And this is probably the aspect that's contended the most logically, where the Earth isn't going to end very, very, very soon. Yes, the climate change is an issue, but we also have technologies that we're working on, and also the whole tree thing. So to have people expose Greta's fears and anxiety about the world ending and us not having a future, and using it to get political reactions from countries and from people, I don't think that's fair. And here's a part that a lot of people don't really talk a whole lot about, and maybe is what a lot of people are exploiting to try to come after her, or people who could potentially be manipulating her could be using as well. So when Greta was 11, she went into a major depression where she did not go to school, and she said that not all of the depression was because of the climate change issue, but she did say that part of it was that, you know, if the world is basically going to end, there was no future for her, no future for her friends. And that's a really depressing thing to think about. To think that all these money-hungry people out there don't care about the environment, and you know that if they don't listen and if they don't do something, you don't have a future, nobody else has a future. That's really scary. And to couple that with depression itself is just, it's a really ugly mix. And then that anxiety comes in, and it's just a storm. And so she didn't go to school, she was stuck in her home, she couldn't go out, she wouldn't do anything. And so her parents, rightfully concerned, talked to her about it. She finally opened up about the whole climate change issue, and seeing that they responded, which good on them for not just being like, oh, that's stupid, Greta, like that would have been horrible. But they did everything in their power to, you know, support their child. And, you know, her mom used her social media to spread the message. She refused to to keep performing in certain countries that she would have to fly to and stuff like that. So they made changes to, you know, be in line with what their daughter felt very strongly with. And so Greta saw that when she speaks, people listen, and she has the ability to influence change, and so that kind of propelled her forward with everything. However, this is also important into why this might be dangerous to put her in front of people so much, is because it seems like they're exploiting the fact that Greta seems to genuinely believe that the world is going to end very quickly if she doesn't somehow save it by making all these countries and all these companies and all these people of power reverse all the effects, or at least get us at like a net zero emission situation. I'm not 100% on all of the arguments in that particular case, but she's saying do something big, and do something now, because we're all gonna die, basically. And I think she genuinely believes that. But is she correct? not necessarily. Now, I was actually pretty happy to see that Greta was in a PSA video where she basically encouraged people to start with planting trees and getting involved in planting things that take CO2 from the air and convert that into oxygen. That's a very natural way to start combating the climate change issue, right? So at least there are smaller things that she's looking into, because a lot of people who are not fans of her kind of alarmist kind of message is that a lot of times people who want power in certain things will take the alarm of people and make what seems to be well-meaning laws, rules, regulations, and whatnot, and impose them, even though the long-term effects of imposing those are dangerous and can be even freedom-stealing in those sorts of situations. So that's kind of the pushback on the whole alarmism. So I was happy to see her promoting that individual kind of, you can help in this way instead of being like laws, 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 because I think in her worldview, she might see the world as, you know, the government takes the action, the government makes people do the things that they're supposed to, and coming from America, I don't believe that the government is supposed to make you do the things you're supposed to do. I believe in personal responsibility, and a lot of people do. So there was a bit of a pushback about worry that she would take that personal responsibility emphasis and make it more on governments doing what they're supposed to do. So again, was happy to see that. And there are also other ways, because trees do take a while to grow. I think there's another thing, I don't remember what exactly it was about, but I also read an article where recently they've discovered how to easily, basically, without a lot of heat or energy, take CO2 and basically convert it into solid carbon and pure oxygen, and they said it has the potential to basically reverse the emissions clock that they're talking about. So we are people who are innovative and inventive and dynamic, and so to like put it all on Greta's shoulders that if we don't like make all the stops right now in big ways, we're all gonna die, that's really not fair, because we have things we're developing and learning more about that we can reverse those effects, or at least to keep them to a minimum, and really in that situation probably actually reverse the effects that we see with the emissions. Now, yes, we should be mindful of what we do. I'm not saying like we should just go trash everything because we can fix it later with technology. Like, that's kind of a stupid thing to do. But to be so alarmist and freaking out and thinking like the world is going to end and putting that kind of anxiety on not only Greta but others, I don't think is really fair. So with all that said, I think that what Greta is doing is admirable. I think that she 100% believes in what she's talking about. I believe that she's a very rational person and that she wants to see, you know, all of us survive on this planet and take care of it. But I do think that she's being exploited a little bit in her fears and her anxiety concerning that. I think that some people in positions of power might be trying to manipulate maybe how that goes, and I don't think Greta sees it that way. I think she just sees, you know, there's people striking and there's people doing things, and that means that they care. But I think we should be careful going forward instead of producing a knee-jerk reaction in a fearful, alarmist kind of manner, if that makes sense. I do think that it's awesome that she's doing something instead of being like many people who are worried about something but do nothing about it. So it is really great to see yet another autistic in the headlines doing great things. But I want to warn you, as fellow autistics and really fellow young people, I don't think we should be asking her to be the greatest perfect representation of all autistics or of all people with Aspergers or all young people, because that's a really heavy burden, and I really do believe that she feels like she's already holding that burden, and for other people to place that expectation on her, it just isn't fair. So please understand she is a human being, and while she deserves praise for doing her best to do what she knows how to do and to speaking up when people might not be willing to listen typically, do take the message of urgency with a grain of salt. Not that we shouldn't do anything, but that we aren't all going to die in a few years, and that we should all take a deep breath and think rationally instead of reacting in a kind of a knee-jerk reaction kind of way. So awesome, good on you, Greta, for doing something that you believe in, and I hope that when things die down, because eventually they do, no matter what, whether something happens because of it or not, I hope that you know that your voice still matters, even if it's not in the headlines and even if it's not, you know, on the news, I hope that you know that your voice matters, even when it matters to your mom and your dad and to your family. Your voice does matter, and I hope that, you know, any decline isn't something that would throw you into a bad place mentally. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I tried to go with my notes. I guess I got a little too used to not using them, so I went a little bit off. I hope that everything still made sense. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and give it a like, and let me know your thoughts about all of this in the comments below. Again, we are not here to hate anybody, okay? So we're not hating on the whole climate change issue. We're not hating on Greta. There have been reprehensible things said about Greta just because of her age or because of Asperger's or anything like that, and that is not okay. But if we can have a productive conversation about this without demeaning people and being hateful toward people, that would be awesome. If you're interested in hearing more autism related things from me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I try to upload every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. I hope that you're having a wonderful week, and see me in my next video. Bye!